Rain hammered against the windshield of the black Rolls-Royce as it crawled through downtown Chicago. At exactly 11:43 p.m., every traffic light ahead turned green. Not by coincidence. Because when Adrian De Luca traveled through the city moved for him. People feared his name more than prison, more than death. The most powerful mafia boss in Chicago rarely spoke louder than a whisper. He never needed to. His silence had buried more enemies than bullets ever could. Tonight, however, something insignificant interrupted his routine. A courier on a bicycle crashed into one of the security SUVs. Bodyguards reacted instantly. Weapons appeared. The terrified young courier raised both hands. "I'm sorry. I delivered the wrong envelope." Adrian didn't even look up from the documents resting on his lap. "Search him." Within seconds, the guards confirmed what they already suspected. The boy wasn't armed. He was simply frightened. One of the envelopes had accidentally fallen into Adrian's leather briefcase during the collision. His chief of security reached for it. "I'll dispose of it." Adrian's eyes drifted toward the pale blue envelope. No stamp, no return address, only a handwritten name. "To whoever finds this too late." Something about the handwriting stopped him. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't dramatic. It trembled, as if every word had been written by someone trying not to cry. "Leave it." The guard hesitated. "Sir?" I said, "Leave it." The car continued through the rain, while Adrian slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. No perfumi, no photographs, no demands, only several pages written in fading black ink. "If you're reading this, I'm probably gone. Please don't blame anyone. I was simply tired. Tired of pretending tomorrow would be different. Tired of smiling so other people wouldn't worry. Tired of believing life eventually gets better. Maybe it does, just not for everyone." Adrian continued reading. For the first time in years, he forgot the city outside. The writer never asked for sympathy, never accused anyone, never begged to be saved. She simply apologized for leaving. She wrote about unpaid medical bills, a younger brother she'd failed to protect, a mother lost years earlier, an apartment she could no longer afford, the loneliness of eating dinner in silence, the exhaustion of waking up every morning already defeated. Near the end, one sentence stood alone on the page. "I don't want to die. I just don't know how to keep living." Adrian stared at those words. Again and again, his jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. One of his bodyguards noticed. He had worked beside Adrian for 12 years. He had seen the mafia boss negotiate with politicians, execute traitors, survive assassination attempts without blinking. He had never seen him pause over a letter. Finally, Adrian folded the pages carefully. Not like evidence, like something fragile. He looked toward his driver. "Finher. Silence." The driver glanced into the rearview mirror. "Sir, the woman who wrote this. There isn't a name. There will be." Adrian's voice remained calm. "If someone asks for help like this," he looked once more at the letter, "they don't die alone." Across the city, 27-year-old Clara Bennett stood on the rooftop of an aging apartment building. The rain soaked her dark coat. Chicago glittered below her like another universe. Beautiful, untouchable. She held another envelope against the real one. The one she believed no one would ever read. She closed her eyes. I tried. The words disappeared into the wind. Footsteps echoed behind her. Miss Bennett? She turned. A confused mail carrier climbed onto the rooftop, completely out of breath. I've been looking everywhere for you. Clara frowned. What? I think there was a mistake with today's collection. He held out an empty mail pouch. Your letter never made it to the outgoing bin. Her heartbeat stopped. What do you mean? It was accidentally mixed into another delivery. Color drained from her face. Where? I'm not exactly sure. The man scratched his head nervously. I was told it ended up inside a private security convoy. A security convoy? He nodded. The expensive kind. Clara's stomach twisted. She had spent hours gathering enough courage to write goodbye. Now, a complete stranger might read every painful word. Embarrassment. Overwhelmed despair. Oh God, she whispered. No. Without another word, she rushed downstairs. She had to find that letter before anyone else did. By sunrise, Adrian's intelligence network had already begun tracing the envelope. Security cameras, postal routes, delivery records, traffic footage. Nothing escaped his organization. His chief investigator entered the penthouse office, carrying a tablet. We have a possible match. Adrian looked up. Go on. Female, 27. Elementary school art teacher. Name. He paused. Clara Bennett. A photograph appeared on the screen. Long chestnut hair. Soft green eyes. A quiet smile that looked as though it had been borrowed from someone else. There was sadness hiding beneath it, the kind most people never noticed. Adrian did. He studied the image longer than necessary. What else? No criminal record. No known affiliations. Outstanding medical debt. Guardian of her 16-year-old brother after their mother's death. Another page appeared. Recent eviction notice. Multiple late payments. Hospital invoices. Adrian leaned back slowly. So, he murmured, the letter wasn't exaggerating. No, sir. His security chief hesitated before asking, what would you like us to do? The room waited. Every order Adrian gave changed lives, sometimes ended them. This one surprised everyone. No surveillance teams. The chief blinked. Sir, I don't want her frightened, but if she's being watched by rivals, then protect her. Without her knowing, the room fell silent. No one questioned him, but everyone wondered the same thing. Why would the most feared man in Chicago spend millions protecting a woman he had never met? That afternoon, Clara arrived at Street Gabriel Medical Center carrying a folder of insurance appeals. Her younger brother, Ethan, sat in the dialysis ward, pretending to smile. You're late. She forced one back. Traffic. He knew she was lying. She knew, he knew. Neither said anything. She brushed his hair away from his forehead. You feeling okay? I will be. You don't have to keep worrying about me. She laughed softly. That's literally my job. From the hallway, unseen by either of them, two men wearing tailored black suits quietly watched the room. Not doctors, not police, protectors, following the order of one man, Adrian De Luca. And somewhere else in Chicago, the Mafia Boss unfolded Clara's letter once more. His thumb rested over the line that refused to leave his mind. I don't want to die. I just don't know how to keep living. For reasons he could not explain. Those words followed him into every meeting, every negotiation, every silence. He had built an empire by deciding who lived and who died. But this was the first life he intended to save. Before she even knew his name, outside his penthouse window, thunder rolled across the skyline. Far below, black SUVs began moving through the city, not toward an enemy, not toward a rival family, toward an ordinary young woman who had unknowingly become the only person capable of changing the heart of the most dangerous man in Chicago. And neither of them realized. Someone else had already discovered the missing letter. Someone willing to kill, to make sure Clara Bennett never learned why it had fallen into Adrian De Luca's hands. The first attempt came 48 hours later. Clara Bennett never saw it. She left Street Gabriel Medical Center just after sunset, with a paper bag of groceries in one hand and a folder of unpaid medical bills in the other. Chicago shimmered beneath a cold drizzle. The sidewalks were nearly empty. She never noticed the black sedan parked across the street. She never noticed the man inside adjusting the suppressor on his pistol. His instructions were simple: retrieve the letter. If necessary, eliminate the woman who wrote it. As he stepped out of the car, another vehicle quietly stopped behind him. A black Rolls-Royce. No screeching tires. No shouting. Only silence. The assassin turned, just in time, to see Adrian De Luca standing beside the open rear door. Tailored black overcoat, hands inside his pockets, rain collecting on his shoulders. His expression remained almost painfully calm. You chose the wrong street. The assassin reached for his weapon. He never had the chance. A single suppressed shot echoed from the rooftop above. The gun fell from his hand. Seconds later, he collapsed onto the wet pavement. Adrian never looked at the body. Instead, his eyes followed Clara as she continued walking down the sidewalk, completely unaware that death had been only a few feet behind her. One of his men approached quietly. She never saw us. Good. What about the shooter? Adrian glanced briefly toward the lifeless figure. Find out who sent him, and if he has friends. His voice turned colder. They've already made their first mistake. The following morning, Clara opened the front door of her apartment and froze. A small white box rested on the welcome mat. No sender, no note. Inside, she found expensive watercolor brushes, professional grade, the exact set she had admired online months ago, but could never afford. She frowned. There had to be some mistake. She carried the box inside, anyway. Ethan looked up from the kitchen table. Did someone finally pay you what you're worth? She laughed softly. I wish. You have a secret admirer? I don't even have enough time for a regular admirer. Neither of them noticed a black SUV parked quietly across the street. Inside Adrian's penthouse, Damian Romano watched his boss study live security feeds from dozens of hidden cameras surrounding Clara's neighborhood. You've been staring at this building for an hour. Adrian didn't answer. Damian sighed. You've protected politicians, judges, foreign diplomats. I've never seen you assign 30 men to one school teacher. I assigned 12. 12 visible. The rest, silence. Damian folded his arms. This isn't about the letter anymore. Finally, Adrian looked at him. What do you think it's about? I think. Damian chose his words carefully. You've become emotionally invested. Adrian's expression hardened. I don't know her. No. Damien nodded. But you're learning her routine. You know what time she leaves work, what coffee she buys, how often she visits the hospital. You've memorized her life. Another long silence. Finally, Adrian replied, I know people who want her dead. Damien smiled faintly. And that's not the same answer. 3 days later, Clara finally saw him again. She was leaving the children's art room at Street Gabriel when the hospital suddenly fell into chaos. A black SUV had stopped outside. Nurses whispered. Security guards rushed toward the entrance. Visitors stepped aside instinctively. Clara looked through the glass doors and saw him, tall, impossibly composed, dressed in a charcoal suit beneath a long black coat. Rain dripped from his hair. The entire lobby seemed to move around him. Yet he remained perfectly still, as if the world naturally adjusted itself to his presence. The receptionist whispered nervously, That's Adrian De Luca. Clara frowned. The businessman? The woman swallowed. Some people call him that. Others called him something far more dangerous. Adrian walked through the lobby without acknowledging anyone. Then, he stopped directly in front of Clara. For several seconds, neither spoke. His gray eyes settled on hers, calm, observant, almost searching. Finally, he said quietly, Your brother is improving. Clara blinked. How do you know about Ethan? I asked. Her heart skipped. Why would you ask? Instead of answering, he looked toward Ethan's hospital room. He's stronger than he realizes. Clara took one cautious step backward. I don't know you. No, you don't. But I know enough. The words should have frightened her. Instead, they carried an unexpected sadness, as though he wished they weren't true. That evening, she found herself unable to stop thinking about him. Who was he? Why did he know Ethan's condition? Why did he look at her like someone carrying a burden she couldn't see? Meanwhile, inside one of Chicago's oldest underground casinos, a meeting had already begun. Around a circular table sat representatives from 3 rival crime families. A photograph lay in the center. Clara Bennett. One man lit a cigar. So, the great Adrian De Luca suddenly develops a conscience. Another laughed. No, he develops a weakness. The oldest among them slowly shook his head, which makes her the most valuable target in Chicago. The next afternoon, Clara returned to her apartment after work. The front door stood slightly open. Ice spread through her veins. Ethan? No answer. She rushed inside. Furniture overturned. Drawers emptied. Photographs scattered across the floor. Nothing valuable had been stolen. Someone had searched for something very specific. Then, she noticed it. Her journal. Gone. Inside it, she had written dozens of pages after composing the goodbye letter. Every fear, every memory, every painful truth. Someone wanted to know everything about her before panic could overwhelm her. Another sound echoed from the hallway. Footsteps. Slow, measured. She grabbed the nearest kitchen knife. The apartment door opened wider. Adrian stepped inside. He looked around the destroyed living room without surprise, almost as if he had expected this. You shouldn't be here. Clara tightened her grip on the knife. You broke into my apartment. I used the spare key under the flower pot. She stared. How do you know about that? I know people came looking for something. Who are you? He looked directly into her eyes. For the first time, there was genuine emotion beneath his calm expression. They're not searching for your journal. They're searching for your letter. The knife slowly lowered. Her breathing became uneven. You? It was you. You read it. Neither denied it, nor apologized. I never meant. I know I wasn't supposed to. Then why didn't you throw it away? His answer came without hesitation. Because you were still alive. The room became unbearably quiet. Clara's eyes filled with tears. You had no right. I know. You invaded my privacy. I know. You've been watching me. Yes. Her voice broke. Why? Adrian took one careful step closer. Close enough that she could hear the rain dripping from his coat. But not close enough to touch her. Because the moment I finished reading your letter, his normally steady voice almost faltered. Someone else started hunting. The woman who wrote it. Before Clara could respond, every light inside the apartment suddenly went out. Darkness. A single gunshot shattered the silence. Glass exploded inward. Adrian moved instantly. He pulled Clara against him and shielded her body as another bullet tore through the living room wall. Outside, black SUVs roared onto the street. The war had officially begun. The second shot missed Adrian's head by less than an inch. Concrete exploded behind him. Without hesitation, he wrapped one arm around Clara's waist and forced her to the floor as a third bullet shattered the apartment window. Stay down. His voice was calm, too calm, like a man who had survived this nightmare hundreds of times before. Outside, black SUVs screeched to a stop. Doors flew open. Men, dressed in black tactical suits, poured into the building. Not police. Adrian's men. The hallway erupted into controlled chaos. Gunfire echoed through the old apartment complex. Clara covered her ears. Her entire body trembled. She had never heard real bullets before, never imagined death could arrive so quickly. Adrian remained perfectly still, listening, counting. 1 shot, 2, 5, then silence. A voice crackled through the earpiece, hidden beneath his collar. 4th floor secure. East stairwell clear. 1 hostile captured. Adrian finally looked down at Clara. Can you stand? She nodded, though her knees barely obeyed. As he helped her up, she noticed something dark spreading beneath his black coat. Blood. You're hurt. It isn't serious. It is serious. She grabbed his sleeve before he could turn away. You've been shot. He glanced at the wound with almost complete indifference. It went through. You need a hospital. I need answers. 10 minutes later, Clara sat inside the back seat of Adrian's armored SUV. Rain streaked across the bulletproof windows. The city blurred into streaks of white and gold. She had never been inside a vehicle that felt more like a moving fortress. Across from her sat Adrian. A medic stitched the wound in his shoulder without anesthesia. He never flinched, never looked away from Clara. Finally, she whispered, "Who wants me dead?" Adrian answered honestly, "I don't know. You just admitted someone is trying to kill me." "Yes." "Then why?" His expression darkened. "Because someone believes you possess something worth murdering for." "The letter?" He nodded once. "The letter." She laughed bitterly. It was goodbye. It wasn't information. It wasn't evidence. It was just. Her voice cracked. My last words. Adrian spoke quietly. Sometimes, the wrong people hear the right words. They arrived at a secluded lakeside estate, hidden behind towering iron gates. The mansion overlooked Lake Michigan. Elegant, silent, completely isolated. This is where you live? No. She frowned. No, I rarely stay anywhere longer than a week. Then, whose house is this? A place no one knows belongs to me. You expect me to stay here? I expect you to stay alive. She looked at him. You don't even know me. His eyes remained steady. I know enough. Meanwhile, deep beneath Chicago, inside an abandoned subway tunnel, converted into a private command center, a man slowly studied photographs spread across a steel table. Clara Bennett. Hospital records, school employment files, family history, and one photograph taken 22 years earlier. A little girl standing beside a woman. The older man's lips slowly curled into a smile. So, he whispered, she survived. His name was Victor Salazar, once believed dead, former financial advisor to the De Luca organization. The only man who knew where billions of hidden mafia assets had disappeared after Adrian's father's assassination, and the only man who recognized Clara's real identity. That evening, Clara wandered through the mansion, unable to sleep. Everything felt unreal. Luxury beyond imagination. Original paintings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. Armed guards outside every entrance. She found Adrian standing alone on the terrace. The rain had finally stopped. He held a glass of untouched whiskey. You should be resting. So should you. Neither moved. Several quiet moments passed before Clara asked, why are you really helping me? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked across the dark water. When I was 12, my father taught me something. She waited. He said, the most dangerous people in the world aren't murderers. They're the ones who stop believing tomorrow exists. Clara slowly looked at him. I recognized that feeling. His voice became almost painfully quiet. When I read your letter, for the first time, she saw something impossible. Loneliness. Not weakness. Not guilt. Loneliness. The kind carried by a man who trusted no one. She realized something in that moment. Everyone feared Adrian De Luca. No one actually knew him. The fragile silence ended when Damien appeared. His expression alone told Adrian something was wrong. We found the shooter, and he never worked for any Chicago family. Who hired him? Damien handed over an old photograph. Adrian stared at it. His face hardened instantly. No. Clara caught a glimpse before he lowered it. A woman holding a little girl. The little girl looked exactly like Hea. What is it? Adrian remained silent. What aren't you telling me? Damien answered instead. The woman in that picture wasn't your mother. Clara froze. What? It was your aunt. My mother never had a sister. That's what you were told. The room became painfully still. Damien continued carefully. Your real name isn't Clara Bennett. Her heartbeat thundered. No, no, you're mistaken. I wish I were. He slid another document across the table. Birth certificate, different name, different parents, different signature, different life. She stared at it in disbelief. This can't be real. Adrian finally spoke. It is. She looked at him with tears forming. You knew? I suspected. For how long? Since yesterday. And you didn't tell me? I needed proof. You let me believe my entire life was real. It was real. It just wasn't complete. She backed away from him. Her breathing became uneven. Who am I? Neither man answered, because they didn't know. Not yet. Hours later, unable to process everything, Clara stepped outside alone. The moon reflected across the lake. Cold wind carried the scent of rain. She wrapped her arms around herself. Footsteps approached. Adrian stopped beside her. Not too close. Never too close. I know you hate me. I don't hate you. Then, what do you feel? She laughed through tears. I don't even know who I am anymore. His gaze softened. I do. She looked at him. You're still the woman who spent every afternoon painting with sick children. The woman who refused to leave her brother's side. The woman who apologized in a letter for taking up space in the world. His voice dropped, almost to a whisper. You are not your past. You are not your name. And whatever secret someone buried, it doesn't change the person standing here. For several seconds, neither spoke. Clara noticed how close they had become, barely inches apart. She could hear his breathing, feel the warmth radiating from him. Her hand almost reached for his. Almost. Instead, she stepped back. I can't trust you. Adrian nodded. I know, but I'll still protect you, even if you never do. Inside the mansion, an alarm suddenly screamed. Red emergency lights flooded every hallway. One of Adrian's security officers burst into the room. Boss, we've lost contact with the hospital. Ethan Bennett is gone. Clara's face turned white. What? The dialysis ward is empty. The security cameras were disabled 6 minutes ago. Damien looked toward Adrian. It wasn't about Clara. It never was. Adrian's expression turned colder than anyone had ever seen. They took her brother. He reached for his pistol. Prepare every team. For what? His answer echoed through the silent mansion. We're going to start a war. The command center inside Adrian De Luca's mansion fell silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Only the blinking red lights reflected across the polished marble floor. Ethan Bennett had vanished. Adrian slowly buttoned his black overcoat. Lock down every property we own. Damien nodded. Already done. Every airport, every harbor, every private runway. They're covered. Adrian looked toward the wall-sized map of Chicago. They're not taking Ethan to negotiate. They're taking him to make Clara surrender. Across the room, Clara could barely stand. My brother. Her voice trembled. He needs dialysis. If they keep him much longer. Adrian crossed the room. For a brief moment, it looked as though he might place a hand on her shoulder. Instead, he stopped inches away. They'll keep him alive. She looked at him desperately. How can you know that? Because dead hostages have no value. His answer was cold, but his eyes betrayed something else. Determination. I'll bring him home. It wasn't a promise made to comfort her. It was a promise made to himself. 3 hours later, a message arrived. No phone call, no email, just an old cassette tape left outside the mansion gates. Damien placed it into a recorder. Static filled the room. Then Ethan's frightened voice emerged. Clara, I'm okay. Don't do what they ask. A loud crash interrupted him. Another voice replaced his. Older, calm, dangerously patient. Good evening, Adrian. Victor Salazar. I've spent 22 years waiting for this conversation. Adrian remained expressionless. What do you want? I want what's mine. You stole it. Victor chuckled. You still believe that's the story. I don't negotiate with kidnappers. No. Victor replied softly. You negotiate with fathers. The tape clicked. Another voice filled the room. A woman, weak, barely audible. Adrian. Clara frowned. I know that voice. Adrian's face changed for the first time. It was almost imperceptible. But Damien saw it. So did Clara. Who is she? No answer. The tape ended. Later that night, Clara entered Adrian's private study. The lights were off. Only the city skyline shimmered through the enormous windows. He stood alone beside the fireplace. You knew that woman. Adrian remained silent. You recognized her. Finally, he spoke. Her name is Elena Rossi. She saved my life. Clara waited. 20 years ago, when my father was murdered, she helped me escape. What happened to her? I believed she died, but she didn't. He closed his eyes briefly. Victor kept her alive. The realization settled heavily between them. For 2 decades, someone had been keeping a witness alive, not out of mercy, but as leverage. The next morning, an anonymous package arrived. Inside, a faded photograph. Clara stared at it. A young woman held a little girl in her arms. The little girl's face looked unmistakably familiar. On the back of the photograph, 3 handwritten words. Ask Elena why. Nothing else. No explanation. No signature. Clara turned toward Adrian. What does this mean? I don't know, but Victor wants us asking the wrong questions. That afternoon, Adrian insisted Clara remain inside the mansion. She refused. I'm done hiding. It's not safe. It hasn't been safe since the day you read my letter. The words struck harder than she intended. He didn't defend himself. Instead, he quietly picked up his car keys. I'll drive. She blinked. You're coming? I said I'd protect you. I didn't ask you to. I know. He opened the passenger door. But I'm coming anyway. Their destination was Street Gabriel Children's Hospital. Not because Ethan was there, but because Elena Rossi had once volunteered under another name. Old employment records. Old photographs. Old memories. The archives occupied a forgotten basement beneath the hospital. Dust covered every shelf. An elderly records manager searched through dozens of storage boxes. Finally, she found one. Elena Rossi. She smiled faintly. I remember her. She was kind, always bringing books for the children. Clara's heartbeat quickened. Do you have a photograph? The woman nodded. She handed over an old staff picture. Clara stared, then froze. Elena wasn't standing alone. Beside her, holding a toddler, stood Clara's mother. Not her aunt, not a stranger. Her mother, Adrian, slowly looked at Clara. Neither of them spoke. The hospital administrator frowned. You didn't know? Catherine and Elena were inseparable. They practically raised that little girl together. What little girl? The woman pointed toward the photograph. The child. Her name was. She adjusted her glasses. Sophia. Clara's breathing stopped. Sophia, not Clara. That was the name on the birth certificate Damien had found. Before anyone could speak, the hospital lights suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the hallway. Emergency alarms screamed. From somewhere above, glass shattered. Adrian reacted instantly. Down. He pulled Clara behind a concrete support column. Armed men poured into the corridor, wearing tactical masks. Not hospital staff, not police. Victor had found them. Gunfire erupted through the archive room. Patients screamed on the upper floors. Doctors rushed children toward emergency exits. Adrian fired only when necessary, forcing the attackers back while keeping Clara behind him. She watched him move with terrifying precision. Every decision, every step, every shot, calculated, never reckless, never cruel, only enough to create an escape. They reached an emergency stairwell. The heavy metal door slammed shut behind them. Clara struggled to breathe. "You could have left me." He looked at her, as though the idea itself was impossible. "I was never going to." For the first time, she believed him, not because of his words, because of his choices. Far above them, sirens echoed through downtown Chicago. The hunt for Ethan had become something far greater. It was no longer about a kidnapped teenager. It was about a hidden past, a stolen identity, and a truth someone had been willing to bury for more than 20 years. As Adrian and Clara disappeared into the rain beneath the hospital loading dock, Victor Salazar watched from the rooftop across the street. He smiled. They've finally found the first piece. He folded another photograph and slipped it back into his coat. They're almost ready to learn who Mafia Bennett really is. Rain swept across the rooftops of Chicago as Adrian's convoy disappeared into the darkness. Neither he nor Clara spoke during the drive. Between them lay the faded photograph. One name, Sophia. One question, who had stolen her life? Damien broke the silence. "We found Victor." Adrian looked up. "Where?" "An abandoned cathedral on the south waterfront. The same place where your father held peace negotiations 22 years ago." Adrian understood immediately. Victor wasn't choosing the location for protection. He was choosing it for symbolism. He wanted the past to bury the future. Inside the abandoned cathedral, hundreds of candles illuminated cracked marble floors. Ethan sat tied to an old wooden chair, weak, pale, but alive. Beside him stood Elena Rossi, older now. Her face carried decades of quiet suffering. Victor calmly loaded a revolver. "You finally came." Adrian stepped inside alone. His men remained outside. "You wanted me. You have me." Victor smiled. "I wanted all of you." Clara slowly entered behind Adrian. The moment Elena saw her, she burst into tears. "Sophia." The name echoed through the cathedral. Clara froze. "No." Elena stepped forward. "I promised your mother I would find you." Victor sighed. "I suppose it's time." He walked toward the old altar. 22 years ago, the De Luca organization controlled nearly every shipping route on Lake Michigan. So did another family, the Bennetts. Clara looked at Adrian. He shook his head. "I never knew them." Victor nodded. "Exactly, because your father refused to destroy them. He wanted peace. My investors wanted war." He smiled without warmth. "So I arranged both." Silence filled the cathedral. "I assassinated Adrian's father. I murdered Sophia's parents. I blamed rival families And while everyone chased revenge, I stole everything: billions, political influence, entire criminal networks, all built on one lie. Clara slowly turned toward Adrian. So, my parents weren't criminals? Victor laughed. They were accountants. They discovered where the money was disappearing. They were going to expose me. So, I erased them. Elena wiped away tears. Your mother begged me to save you. I escaped with you. We changed your name. But Victor found us. He took Ethan. Clara stared. What? Ethan isn't your brother by blood. He's my son. The room fell completely silent. I raised both of you together. I wanted you to believe you were family, because family is chosen, not only born. Clara walked toward Ethan. She untied him with trembling hands. He looked up weakly. I don't care. You'll always be my brother. He smiled through exhausted tears. And you'll always be my sister. Victor slowly raised the revolver. This touching reunion changes nothing. He aimed directly at Clara. Before anyone could react, Adrian stepped between them. The gunshot echoed through the cathedral. Pain exploded through Adrian's side. He staggered, but remained standing. Victor fired again. This time, Damien tackled him from behind. The revolver slid across the stone floor. Federal tactical agents alerted earlier through anonymous evidence Adrian had secretly delivered, stormed the cathedral from every entrance. Victor looked around. For the first time, he realized he had already lost. He hadn't been defeated by violence. He had been defeated by the truth. Handcuffs closed around his wrists. 22 years of lies ended in absolute silence. Weeks later, Chicago newspapers called it the largest organized crime investigation in decades. Victor's financial empire collapsed. Corrupt officials resigned. Missing evidence resurfaced. Dozens of innocent families finally learned what had happened to their loved ones. Adrian voluntarily testified, not to save himself, but to dismantle everything his father's generation had built. He accepted responsibility for the crimes committed under his leadership, not because every crime had been his, but because someone had to end the cycle. 3 months later, spring returned to Chicago. The old cathedral had become a memorial. The abandoned warehouse where Ethan had been held was demolished. The money recovered from Victor's accounts funded scholarships, hospitals, and community programs. For the first time, something beautiful had grown from decades of violence. A small bookstore opened near Lake Michigan. Its sign read, "Tomorrow begins here." Children filled the reading corner every Saturday morning. Ethan, now healthy again after receiving a successful kidney transplant, helped organize the shelves. Elena volunteered twice a week, reading stories to young patients from Street Gabriel Children's Hospital. Life slowly became ordinary, exactly what Clara had once believed she would never deserve. One rainy evening, the familiar sound of a black Rolls-Royce stopped outside. Adrian stepped out alone. No bodyguards, no convoy, no weapons visible, only a single envelope in his hand. Clara smiled faintly. You finally came without an army. I was told bookstores prefer quiet customers. She laughed for the first time in weeks. He handed her the envelope. Inside was the original letter, perfectly preserved, every fold exactly as it had been that night. She looked at him. You kept it. I almost burned it. But I couldn't. She opened to the final page. Below her last sentence, someone had written a single line in neat black ink. It wasn't there before. You were wrong about one thing. She frowned. What thing? Adrian answered softly. You wrote that no one would notice if you disappeared. He took one careful step closer. I noticed. Silence surrounded them. Rain tapped gently against the bookstore windows. He didn't touch her, didn't rush, didn't ask for forgiveness. Instead, he spoke the promise that had quietly guided every decision since that impossible night. I couldn't save everyone. I couldn't change my past, but I could make sure. The woman who wrote this letter lived long enough to write a different ending. Tears filled Clara's eyes. Without saying a word, she reached for his hand. This time, he didn't hesitate. Their fingers intertwined, not because either of them had forgotten the darkness behind them, but because they had finally stopped allowing it to decide who they would become. Outside, the rain slowly faded. The first rays of evening sunlight broke through the clouds, reflecting across Lake Michigan. For years, Adrian De Luca had believed power was measured by fear. Clara Bennett, Sophia Bennett, had believed her story was destined to end with a goodbye letter. Both had been wrong. Some letters end a life. Others begin one. And as the lights inside the bookstore glowed warmly against the fading storm, another anonymous envelope slipped through the mail slot. Adrian picked it up. No return address. Only 6 handwritten words on the front. Please, don't let me disappear too. He looked at Clara. She met his eyes and nodded. Together, they opened the envelope. Their next story had already begun.